Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Astro Bloom podcast. My name is Vanya Banks. I'm a spiritual astrologer and tantric embodiment coach. And this episode is something I'm so excited to share with you. It comes at a perfect time. We're currently in a Venus retrograde cycle. And these cycles are something that I have been working with, honestly, for more than I'm actually conscious of, or for longer than I'm conscious of. Now, looking back at these significant cycles that happen once every 18 months ish, I've realized that I've made pretty much every major sort of life decision during this time, or significant connections have come into my life at this time. There's been so much that has been revealed to me by following these cycles into the past, but then also working with them more consciously as I've gotten deeper into my own astrology practice, into my understanding of her energy, into my communication and my connection with Venus. Now, um, in this episode, I'm going to share a little bit about, recent sort of initiations that Venus has taken me through in connections with very potent mirrors and catalysts in my own life. And I'm going to share a little bit with you about how you might be able to work with Venus and what you might want to reflect on, and how to deepen your connection with her. So, like I was saying, we are currently in a Venus retrograde cycle. So, Venus is now retrograde in the sign of Aries and Pisces. So, she's currently in Pisces. She's retrograded back from being in Aries. We've been in this cycle since end of January. So, January 28th, she entered her pre-retrograde shadow. March 1st, she went retrograde in Aries, and traced back her steps, aligned with the sun on March 22nd, and then started to emerge from the underworld in the first degree of Aries, on March 29th. Now, on April 12th, she's going to go direct. Uh, and this is where she's going to be in the sign of Pisces. And then May 15th is when this full cycle is done. Now, we do look at the pre and post shadow periods as part of this journey, but the main kind of 40-day transformation, where she's essentially descending into the underworld, mirroring the myth of Inanna in mythology, and also Persephone in Greek mythology. These two goddesses essentially were either abducted or voluntarily kind of went into the underworld. And what this represents is this journey of Venus dipping below the horizon as she moves through her shadow period, or through her retrograde period. And of course, the underworld is symbolizing, going within, facing our shadows. And when we're talking about Venus, this energy is all about self-worth. It's our connection to our sensuality, to our, heart space, that heart to womb connection. It's our connection to our desires and how we are able to align ourselves to the things that we truly desire, so that we can actually magnetize those types of experiences to us. The symbol for Venus is a circle with a cross underneath. And so the circle is called the circle of spirit. And then the cross is the cross of matter. And so it quite literally symbolizes how we take the things that are kind of in the ether, in spirit form and energetic form, and how we can materialize those into matter. So it is absolutely an energy that is crucial to connect with, to embody in your own chart, to understand your own Venus archetype, to be able to manifest, to be able to track the types of relationships, the types of abundance, the types of connection that you desire in your life. Now, Venus is a very, very earthly energy. Like, she's all about sensuality, pleasure. She is the embodiment of like what it means to be in this physical body. So she does rule, our material possessions as well. And we know that these things are all really rooted, like love and money are really rooted in our self-worth, in our relationship to ourselves. And so at the end of the day, everything that is mirrored to us through our Venus experiences and initiations is just getting us to understand our relationship with ourselves deeper, and is leading us into a deeper intimacy with ourselves and with our sort of truth and our true longings and our true desires. And so, yeah, this 40-day period that we're in, from March 1st until April 12th specifically, and including those shadow periods on either side, is a time to notice, are there significant connections coming into your life that are teaching you about what you do and don't desire, what you are worthy, what you are what you truly want in your life, right? And are they mirroring you some way and mirroring to you some ways that you might actually still have wounding or beliefs that are not in alignment with that, right? So attracting maybe lovers or connections that don't actually give you the thing that you need in terms of emotional intimacy or physical intimacy or whatever it might be, and kind of noticing, where are these blocks? Why do I believe I might not be worthy of that? What is my relationship to money, abundance, all these things? How does that mirror my connections, my romantic connections specifically? And in paying attention to Venus's cycle, so the last Venus retrograde we had was in the summer of 2023. So you might want to think back to then as well, and sort of what was initiated for you then. It was happened in July and August of 2023. These are the types of things that we look for in astrology. It's all about tracking cycles, understanding the archetypes, and noticing, right? Awareness. Her this cycle that she paints, so speaking from personal experience, sort of, I think it's always really great to pay attention, first of all, to her cycles, right? Notice what's coming up for you. A great way to do this, of course, is to keep a journal, and that way you can look back and notice what was coming up for you around those times. But at the same time, I think working with Venus, you have to develop a relationship with her, just like every other planet, just like every other, deity or god or goddess that you might be invoking in your rituals. And Venus to me is, first of all, it's an understanding of how she shows up in my own chart. So my own Venus is in Scorpio. If we look at the Placidus house system, she is in the 11th house. So that's an Aquarian kind of energy. Flare. And if we're looking at whole signs, she's in my first house. So that's a little bit of an Aries energy. And for me, the way that I really embody this energy is understanding that I am someone who values deep soul merging connections. I am someone who's all in or all out. I'm quite intense. I'm very passionate. I tend to want to merge, right? As Scorpio energy is all about merging. It's all about the depths. I also am someone who values emotional depth in connecting with people. So whether that is having difficult conversations, it is something that I need. I need to be able to speak the truth, and I want people to mirror that back to me. If we're looking at that Aries and Aquarian type flare from the first and 11th house, I'm someone who does place a lot of value on community, on like-minded ideals, future-oriented, growth-oriented type energy. And I also value independence and people being their unique selves, right? And this is the energy that you then have to show up in the world with, right? If you are embodying that energy, then that is you stepping into alignment with the truth of your Venus archetype. So that's just one example. Now, I have a free astro ritual guide for emotional healing that I will link in the show notes that actually takes you into your Venus sign, well, your Venus element. It's kind of a little intro into getting to know your archetype, and it gives you a little customized ritual of how to embody that energy as well. So that's a really useful starting place for you if you're new to this work. The other way for me to work with her energy is I am someone who is quite Venusian, in my energy in general. So I really value aesthetic. I really enjoy, putting thought and care into how I present myself in the world, my outfits, my jewelry, like all of these things. They're kind of a ritual for me. Even doing my makeup, doing my hair, stuff like that, not from like a superficial place, but really because I believe that everything you do in art is everything you do in life is an extension of this creative energy that you have in yourself. And it's like it's a creative outlet and expression. I think someone said like life is art, and that is truly what I believe, and that is such a Venusian, I think, thought to have, belief to have. So for me, it's things like adorning myself, right? Like making these things a ritual. It's about paying attention to her movements. It's about embodying that energy in my chart. Um, and for me, the other way that I've learned that Venus is communicating to me is through symbolism. So one of the things being, for example, like people, let's say someone's reading a book about the descent of Inanna into the underworld, like that's symbolic to me of something that this person is teaching me about my Venus archetype, for example. I had that with an initiation that I'll share a little bit about last year. But the other big thing for me is roses. So when I've always loved roses, it's a flower I've always been drawn to. But basically, when Venus moves through her sort of like cycle around the sun with Earth, the way that she crosses paths with Earth actually paints an 8-petaled rose in the sky or in the universe. And so she's very much connected to the energy of the rose. And the rose, as we know, is this very high vibrational plant medicine that has that really has a huge affinity for the heart chakra. And the heart is also the bridge between the spiritual chakras and the material chakras. So to me, this chakra is very much connected to that Venus energy of like bringing spirit into matter, right? It's the bridge between the two. So, you know, when we understand how to work with this energy, or when we invite her into our lives, and when we consciously cultivate this relationship with her, and when we pay attention to her cycles, we can start to deepen again this connection to our truth, and we can start to embody that in a more conscious way. And so that increases our capability to magnetize, to attract in a very feminine way, right? She's a very feminine energy, the things that we desire into our lives. And it also gives us an opportunity to understand that when we have certain, like, very maybe intense or karmic connections come into our lives, especially during these Venus retrograde cycles or potent cycles in her journey through the sky, we can look at those connections not from like a victim mentality of, oh, this person didn't show up in the way that we needed them to, or I'm a victim in this, or they hurt me, or hold resentment towards that dynamic. We can actually take a look at that and ask, like, how has this person initiated me into a deeper understanding of what I truly desire in my relationships, in my romantic connections, in, what have they mirrored to me about my own barriers to allowing the type of intimacy I desire into my life? And how have they maybe mirrored some of my own shadow expressions of this energy that I'm still working to heal? So we are currently in one of these rebirth cycles. When she, on the new moon eclipse in Aries on the March 29th, 2025, she started emerging from this underworld journey. And in the mythology of Inanna and Persephone, they descend into the underworld, and basically through the underworld, they are reborn. They die in the underworld. And it is this false self that dies. They strip themselves of anything that is inauthentic to their hearts. And as they start to emerge from the underworld, they are reborn. So it's this resurrection. And it's this resurrection of like power, of learning how to be in your power when it comes to these themes that I've been discussing. So as we now move through this rising from the underworld in this portion of the Venus retrograde journey, it is about stepping into that truth, right? Reclaiming the parts of ourselves that are actually true to who we are and how we want to show up. So I want to share with you a personal journey just sort of since, the last, I guess, retrograde cycle with Venus and sort of some connections I've had. So like I said, the last Venus retrograde happened in July and August of 2023. So for me, this was a moment of awakening to a desire that I had, which was to no longer be a wife. I felt this very distinct. I remember I was at a festival in Ontario, and I had this journey, this like meditation that I went on, and I had this very distinct like ping or download that kind of said like, I just don't want to wear that label anymore. And I would say that was a little bit of an awakening for me. I had known this, I would say, prior for a few years, but it was the first time I had like openly admitted it to myself, and it was so blatant that I couldn't ignore it really.
Are you interested in unlocking the full expression of your authentic self through plants and planets? Go to astrobloom.ca and use the code ASTROBLOOMPOD to save 10% off of your astrology reading.
Fast forward to Venus's conjunction with the sun in Gemini in June of 2024. This was after eclipse season. During that eclipse season in March and April of that year, I had kind of acted on the realization I had from the previous summer, and had decided to, leave my ex-partner. And I mean, I'm not going to get into the details of all of that, out of respect for, the love that was shared between us, but it was very much, it wasn't for lack of love or respect or anything like that. It was just, I needed to grow out of an old version of myself, and it was simply time to move on, because I was no longer the same person, and the person that I needed to be and needed to step into just was not an energetic fit in that life anymore. And yeah, so fast forward to the June of 2024, I had just made this decision, and I was still kind of holding out for hope. I guess part of, my ego was kind of holding on for hope that like maybe things would work out. Obviously, I had to let go of this whole future I had imagined for my life and whatnot. But deep down, I mean, I knew it was the decision that I needed to make. But either way, on the Venus Cazimi, so when the Venus and the Sun meet, they met in Gemini, which is my seventh house. And at this time, I met someone who really provided the spark for me to commit to this decision that I made, and like kind of witness and understand that there are other possibilities out there for me that might be more in alignment with the person that I now was. And so this was really that like initiation of the spark. It was this spark that lit a fire to get me to, first of all, physically move across the country, because nothing ever came from this connection. I just want to illustrate that or reiterate that. There was nothing really significant that came from this spark, but the spark itself was the very thing that I needed to show me that like this was the right choice for me in the moment. And it in a lot of ways it triggered a lot of wounds for me. This connection was something that I needed to see a lot of the ways that I was still operating from, like my wounded inner child at that time. But it was also the absolutely necessary, again, initiation, spark, to confirm that, you know, this was the way that I needed to move forward. And needless to say, you know, after that, I had committed to making the move across to BC in my van, all of these things, and I ended up in a town called Revelstoke, where I then met, you know, multiple other initiations along the way. The interesting thing was this spark also came with some symbolism. For example, I had met this person and there was talk of like this mythology around Inanna and the descent into the underworld and all of these things. And it was just so, it was so Venus. It was so Venusian. You know, I knew that this was her teaching me something. And at the time, I didn't really know what that was going to be, but I had to surrender to the fact that this was presenting itself in my life for some reason. So next comes eclipse season in sort of September, October, November, and we've got Venus conjunct the South Node in Libra. And this was the initiation of sort of more of this shadow flame archetype. Now, the shadow flame archetype was a very, very soulmate like connection, instant recognition, very intense, energetic, spiritual, emotional, physical chemistry. It felt like, you know, my intuition knew that this wasn't going to last. And this person wasn't really at the level of self-awareness that I would need in any prolonged intimate connection. But I didn't really have control over how this panned out because it was so magnetic. And at the end of the day, this shadow flame connection was like really mirroring to me like the types of things that I did desire in a romantic connection. But at the same time, there were obvious gaps that I was essentially trying to ignore. Like there was a lack of emotional availability, and I was trying to stay detached and casual, but it was too intense to do that. And it was just such a mirror of some of my core wounds around abandonment, because actually in this dynamic, it kind of panned out that I wasn't being chosen. And to me, this activated a very core and very old wound where my first, you know, romantic connection um, betrayed me for someone else and chose that person over me. And this was a wound that I had lived with since I was like 17 years old. So at the same time, I saw this connection as a deep awakening to my eroticism, to that energy within me that was dormant for a very long time because I was so disconnected from pleasure and from feeling. I was in quite a numb space for a long time in my life, and this connection was what I needed to reawaken that. And even though it was incredibly emotionally challenging, it was a roller coaster. It came at a time where I also was having all sorts of other challenges in my life, you know, being in a new place, repetitive sprained ankles, financial issues, of course, they all just went hand in hand. And at the end of the day, like that person couldn't show up in the way that I needed them to. And that showed me the ways that I needed to show up for myself. You know, I was projecting these emotional needs onto someone who wasn't capable of providing them. And it just led me into a deeper intimacy with myself. And it also showed me that I was, in a lot of ways, rejecting this sort of mother archetype within myself, and was therefore attracting partners in my life or romantic connections in my life who very much mirrored the same thing in terms of having like a wounded energy with the mother archetype. And so I would end up kind of needing to caretake them and subconsciously project that archetype into the dynamic. Yeah, so, into the end of 2024, I was sort of trying to build a security with myself, trying to really tend to those wounds of feeling abandoned, feeling not chosen, and choosing myself and choosing to spend time on nurturing the connections that made me feel worthy, spending time with friends, learning new things, and also just trying to heal my relationship with money and self-worth and all of these things. But in that, I had kind of become a little bit closed off, I would say, to, romantic connections because I'd lost hope, understandably. Now, fast forward into the new year, I would say, during the pre-retrograde shadow period of Venus, and obviously leading into the beginning of eclipse season, there was another connection that kind of slowly crept in. And in a lot of ways, it mirrored some of the same dynamics that I had experienced the fall prior. It was never going to last because I was leaving, but it was this really like central spell type of archetype where this connection really showed me, what I still craved in terms of ease, connection, joy, playfulness. But at the same time, it taught me to see things from a realistic perspective. I think with my Pisces moon, it can definitely, and I have a Cancer Chiron in the eighth house, so I tend to form very deep emotional attachments to people quite easily, to places, all these things, and have a hard time letting go of that. And so that was definitely a dynamic that I was trying to heal from the fall. And so this new connection that kind of crept its way into my life really taught me more about that dynamic and how to energetically cut cords and contain my own energy, even though I was being intimate with someone else, and understand that, I can engage in the type of intimacy that I desire, but I can also have a realistic perception of where this person might be at and where this dynamic is at in terms of like emotional capacity, availability, and all of these things. And in a lot of ways, it mirrored to me how I was maybe still rejecting my own intensity, because the dynamic that came up here was that I was projecting again some of my own emotional needs onto this dynamic, and they had sort of proven that they weren't really capable of meeting that. But needless to say, it was really just a mirror of the ways that I was still rejecting my own intensity and depth because I felt like it was too much for people to hold. And in doing that, I was just attracting situations and connections where that was then the truth. And it was what perpetuated. At the same time, this connection taught me, because it wasn't as sort of karmic, or I don't really like using the word toxic, but we can use it in this case, because I can't think of a better word to use. Um, it taught me that like passion can also be safe, and it can also be just in for a short period of time. It can be for a moment. It can be for a season, and you can sort of have that and let go and detach, and you don't need to hold on to that connection or that energetic tie. And you can also just meet people where they're at. And in doing that, it really solidified and drove home this message and this learning of understanding how to stay in my power. Scorpio Venus, Chiron in the eighth house, Scorpionic house. How to stay in my power even though I am allowing access to such an intimate energy in these connections. So having that desire to merge, but simultaneously being sometimes afraid of it, and afraid of losing my power in that scenario, and sort of being in this and acting from this wounded place of like the inner child that just wants to be chosen and doesn't want to be abandoned. I was giving my power away because it was such a core wound that was being triggered in a lot of these instances. Is like, oh, why aren't you choosing me? Why aren't you showing up for me? Why aren't you taking care of me? Well, it's really because I wasn't containing my own energy, and I wasn't cutting those energetic cords, drawing my energy back to myself, right? Like allowing myself to merge and then allowing myself to separate and to be contained within myself and to be sufficient and secure within myself, which is, such a lesson for me with how much water I have in my chart. So, all in all, I wanted to share this sort of archetypal journey that I've been initiated into with Venus. And this is just one small portion of my work with Venus. But it just happened so intensely over such a short period of time that I thought it would be really cool to share, how these lessons and these initiations really come up as mirrors and as catalysts into a deeper embodiment and into a deeper connection with yourself, and to build that intimacy with what you truly desire. So now, I know that it is not my I'm not here to be chosen. I'm here to choose. Taught me discernment. Who do I give this energy to? Who do I allow to access this sacred energy that I have? Um, this energy that does want to merge and that does want to be seen at its depths. But it's all about like discernment and not just diving right into it, right? Scorpio Venus tends to do that sometimes. Um, it taught me that, you know, um, to redefine love and attraction in some ways. I opened myself up to connections that were not necessarily sort of my type or what my ego thought were my type. And they actually ended up being some of the safest connections that I've experienced in the past. Um, it taught me to see everything with more gratitude and compassion, because even though maybe some of these initiations didn't end how I expected them to or wanted them to, I understood that these initiations were mirrors into myself in some ways and were showing me where I still needed to do work, where I still needed to meet myself deeper, where I needed to hold space for my inner child that was hoping to be chosen. And it just led me into a deeper embodiment of this energy. And I know that that's keep bringing me deeper into alignment with the things I truly desire. And it's going to help me bring that into my reality and attract it into my reality, because now I have discernment. Um, it taught me to embody more play, pleasure, stay in my power. to choose myself first, right? To honor my intensity, the things that I actually desire, and to know that um, when someone doesn't choose me, it just means that something about them and their capacity to show up in that energy. It doesn't have anything to do with who I am or, what. Um, there's no storyline that feeds into about who I am or how worthy I am. It's just that there's something better that's coming. Um, it also taught me really about coming home. It brought me home to my truth. Like I said, for a long time, I was quite numb in the way that I was showing up in the world, and it really deepened my ability to feel and to step into my truth in terms of my own sexual energy and creative energy. And I think it just taught me a lot about staying present and not projecting potential onto others, understanding that someone's potential is not their truth, and learning to recognize the truth in a connection. And then understanding that, like, I can still choose that connection if I want, but coming at it then from a place of truth and understanding that where a certain person is in terms of their ability to meet certain needs that I have, and that way maintaining my power in that dynamic. So saying, I don't need you to meet these needs because I can meet them myself, right? So, all in all, I think the lesson of, this energy is Venus is incredibly powerful. And I encourage you to reflect on even just these two recent retrogrades, like I mentioned, July and August of 2023. And right now, some of those dates that I mentioned through March into April, and what this means for you, especially if you want to take a look at where Aries and Pisces are in your chart. The last Venus retrograde in 2023 was in Leo. So that could be looking at the Leo section of your chart and just asking yourself, in your recent, let's say, intimate connections, or in even just relationship patterns, money patterns, all these things that Venus rules during those time periods, what kind of mirrors showed up for you? What themes were present for you during these time periods or are present for you right now? And also, how do you know when you're being initiated with Venus, for example? For me, there's so much symbolism with the rose. It's actually insane. Like, I always know that, yeah, when I have a connection and things about the rose come up, or like I said, like some of these mythologies around Persephone or Inanna or these types of things, I always know that it's an initiation and that I'm going to learn something about this energy. And that's going to lead me deeper into an embodiment of my desires and heal my self worth. And then finally, an invitation to step into your Venus archetype deeper. So you'll want to grab the free guide in the show notes. This is going to take you through a personalized ritual based on the element of your Venus sign. And then I'm actually also developing a way more in-depth journey for you. That's going to be a 4-week journey to take you through healing grief and other complex emotions through Tantra and astrology. And Venus plays a huge role in this because she is our connection to pleasure and joy and embodiment and Tantra and all these things. And so she is incredibly instrumental in this work that I'm doing. And I'm so excited to share more about this with you. But for now, because this is being released in spring of 2025, there is a VIP sign up form in the show notes so that you can be first to know about it and get exclusive savings and first dibs. So super excited for this. It is called, Healing Grief Through Tantra and Astrology. And I'd love to hear your insights, comments, feedback on this episode. If you enjoyed it, if it resonated, what your sort of insights are around your own Venus journey. I'm always happy to chat. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time.